Hello everyone and welcome back. It is time to do my May reading wrap up, and in May I read 14 books. I'm really not quite sure how I managed to fit that in because some of them are actually quite long, but I managed 14 books altogether. So this is going to be pretty extensive. I have my notes ready to go, every single book I've read. So let's just get straight into this one because there's a lot to get through this month. So I started the month out with Tiamat's Wrath by James S. A. Corey, and this is the 8th book of The Expanse. So let's not really go into details, 8 books into a series, but this one just seemed to take a long time to get anywhere. We're moving people around to get them where they need to be for not only the climax of this book, but really the climax of this series. I still enjoyed spending time in this world, love the characters. I did drop my rating from a 5-star to a 4-star, simply because this first half of this book just went nowhere. We were just moving and discussing, and yeah, great to spend time with them, but the plot took a long time to show up. The second book I read was on my Kindle, and this was Slaying the Vampire Conqueror by Carissa Broadbent, and I received an e-arc from this from the author. She was commanded to kill him with a single strike to the heart, but she didn't expect hers to betray her. Selena has sacrificed everything to worship her goddess, even her eyes, and in worship of the goddess of fate, she has been turned from an orphan street rat to a highly disciplined killer. An invading vampire army is determined to overthrow Glaia's tyrannical king, and Selena is given the task: infiltrate the vampire army, gain the leader's trust, and slay the vampire conqueror. This is part of the world of Nyaxia but takes place elsewhere, and it was really interesting to see another goddess's magic. Carissa's leading ladies are bloodthirsty in a hard world, and Selena is no different. Some of the setup did feel a touch convenient, but Selena really does know what she's doing. I did find this didn't quite hit the highs of the first duology we had in this world, but I really enjoyed the expansion of our universe, and I gave this one 4 out of 5. Then I read Lost in the Moment and Found by Shauna Maguire, and I finally managed to get hold of this one. It had been weirdly stocked on Amazon for a while. It was always going to take a month to come, and then randomly it popped up one day. So if you've ever lost a sock, you'll probably find it here. If you've ever wondered about a favourite childhood toy, it's probably in a shelf out back. Antoinette has lost her father. Metaphorically, he's not in the shop and she won't see him again. But when Nancy finds herself lost, she discovers that no matter how many doors open for her, leaving the shop for good may not be as simple as it sounds. And stepping through the doors exacts a price. So if you go into this one, pay attention to the content warnings and author's comments at the start of the book. Nancy's life at the start of this novella is uncomfortable to read, and it is supposed to be. This novella packs in far more gut-wrenching emotion than you would expect to fit in a book this small. But there is still magic here, and we learn far more about the doors, so I'm glad I continued on with this series. They are bloody expensive though. I did rate this one 4 out of 5. Then I read a highly anticipated read, and this was Descendants Machine by Gareth L. Powell. When Nicola Mafalda's ship comes under attack, she's deeply traumatised by the actions that are taken to keep her alive. Months later, when an old flame comes to her for help, she realises that she must find a way to forgive not only her ex-lover, but also her ship. Reckless factions are trying to reactivate a machine that has laid dormant for millennia. To stop them, Nicola and her crew must put aside their differences, sneak aboard a vast alien megaship, and stay alive long enough to prevent galactic devastation. So this takes place in the same universe as Stars and Bones, but is not a direct sequel. While this could be an entry point, I do feel you get a better handle of the world if you've read Stars and Bones first, because it does go into far more detail about the huge colony ships that the humans are on. This is told in a good number of point of view chapters with different characters, including Nicola's ship, and I found that each of the characters had a pretty distinct voice. This is really fast paced with short snappy chapters to keep the momentum going throughout. Throughout this series so far, I'm really enjoying seeing how humans live and work in space, and it is a universe that feels absolutely lived in. The ending really does ramp up very, very rapidly, and I found that things were resolved a little bit too quickly. I had to go back and read pages to make sure I hadn't missed anything, but still, I had a lot of fun with this one, and I rated it 5 out of 5. Then I read Black Bloom by Felix I.D. Demaro, and I have actually reviewed this one. It starts with a viral image of a young boy plucking a single black dandelion from between the train tracks. The weed is considered nothing more than a mutation, a genetic abnormality, and within weeks, the black dandelions have spread around the world, and pretty much everyone has gone blind. This was a pretty short read, it's only a novella, and this was utterly absorbing. This is told as a series of diary entries by Alexander, and he also collects news headlines and stories, and there are some pretty nice illustrations throughout. This is set in 2045 and has some interesting extrapolations of things that are affecting our lives today. I found that despite its short length, it had some really well developed characters and a wonderfully creeping feeling throughout. I gave this one 4 out of 5. Then the next book I read was A House with Good Bones by T. Kingfisher, and I always look forward to a T. Kingfisher. Samantha Montgomery pulls into the driveway of her family home to see a giant vulture sat on the mailbox staring at the house. Inside, everything has changed. Gone is the eclectic warmth, the explosion of colour she expected, and instead everything has been painted a sterile white. Now it's very important to say grace before dinner, and her mother won't hear a word against Sam's long dead and not really missed grandmother. The longer Sam stays, the stranger things get, and every day more and more vultures circle overhead. So this was just wonderfully gothic storytelling, and the house becomes central to the story in the most delightfully creepy way. This was just so wonderfully atmospheric, and I absolutely inhaled it. The growing weirdness, the building tension, and then the weird, disturbing turns things take. I'm finding that I'm enjoying T. Kingfisher's slightly more horror stuff as much as her fantasy stuff. So I gave this one 4 out of 5. The next book I read was A Necromancer Called Gam Gam by Adam Holcomb. A grandmotherly necromancer is seeking resolution for her past with the aid of her loyal entourage, an undead cat, and a spectral knight. A girl on the run from the Eternal Empire for the mysterious power she possesses. When a chance encounter throws them together, Gam Gam will do anything to protect Mina from the sergeant hounding her, including raising the dead, as long as they are dressed for the occasion. I received this as an e-arc from the author. So this was an incredibly charming debut that was just over far too quickly. It throws you straight into the action, and the momentum carries you really quite quickly through the book. I really enjoyed seeing the relationship between Mina and Gam Gam grow throughout this book, and overall it just feels cosy and delightful, but it is not afraid to shy away from some heavier subjects. I gave this one 4 out of 5. The next book I read was Tress of the Emerald Sea by Brandon Sanderson, and I actually borrowed this from the library, but it has, of course, gone back. The only life Tress has known on her island home in the Emerald Sea has been a simple one, with the simple pleasures of collecting cups bought by sailors from faraway lands and listening to the stories that her friend Charlie tells. But when his father takes him away to find a bride and disaster strikes, Tress must sneak aboard a ship to seek out the sorceress of the dangerous midnight sea. Can Tress leave her simple life behind and sail a sea where a drop of water means instant death? So this is very much more of a fairy tale than Brandon Sanderson's other stuff in its structure and how the story is told, and it is just utterly charming. I loved Tress as a character, taking control of her own life, making decisions, and coming to the realisation that at the end of her adventures, she is not the same person as at the start. So this is a standalone in the Cosmere, and I will definitely be getting my own copy at some point. I haven't decided if that's going to be a hardcover yet or if I'm going to wait for the paperback. I gave this one 5 out of 5. So the next book I read was Call of the Bone Ships by R.J. Barker, and this is the second book in the Tide Child trilogy, so really going to the synopsis would spoil book 1. But we see more of the world. We have a lot of expansion, continuation of events that we saw in book 1, of course. It was again slow at the start, but by the end I was ready for book 3, which I haven't read yet, but I gave this one 4 out of 5. Then I did it. I read Leviathan Falls, which is the 9th and final book of The Expanse. This came out in paperback a couple of months ago, and this is the first time I read it, and I have so many mixed feelings about this one. It was a good conclusion to 9 books, but at the same time, so little happened, and there was an entire plot line that was introduced that I felt that if that was removed, we would not have lost a single thing about what happened in this book. But still, it's wrapped up, it's done. I gave it 4 out of 5. Will I reread the entire of The Expanse again? Of course I will, I love it. And to go with Leviathan Falls, I read Memories Legion, and I finally got a copy that had all its pages. So this is the short stories and novellas from The Expanse. The TV show had actually used a lot of these short stories to fill in some gaps with some characters, so I was pretty familiar with basically what the short story was. Obviously we go into more detail in this one, and it was just nice to get a bit more backstory for some people and fill in a few gaps here and there. There was a couple of short stories where I was really not interested in learning more about the character, but some really good ones. Gave this one 4 out of 5. Continuing on with the short story collections, I read The Last Reef and Other Stories by Gareth L. Powell. This is a pretty solid short story collection, and some are interconnected, some are pretty fantastical, and some feel a little bit more rooted in real life. I do really enjoy Gareth L. Powell's short stories, and I believe there is another collection coming out next year, I want to say, so I'm really looking forward to that one. There are a few really good standout pieces in here, including a piece of sci-fi horror that you will not be able to forget. So I gave this one 4 out of 5. We're getting there. We've only got 2 books left. I read Howls Moving Castle by Diana Wynne Jones. In the land of Ingaray, where 7 league boots exist, along with cloaks of invisibility, Sophie Hatter attracts the attention of the Witch of the Waste, who places a curse on her. Determined to make the best of things, Sophie travels to the one place where she believes she could get help: the strange castle that is hovering over the nearby hills. But the castle belongs to the dreaded wizard Howl, whose appetite, they say, is only satisfied by the hearts of young girls. So I just really enjoyed this one. I didn't have a lot to say about it at the end, other than this was, just nice. I really enjoyed Sophie as a character and how she sort of grew through events of this, and just how utterly done with people's shit that she is. It did feel a touch chaotic at times, but we had some great characters, and I really want to reread it. So I gave this one 4 out of 5. So the final book I read this month was A Dowry of Blood by S.T. Gibson, and I don't even give enough of a fuck to tell you what this book is about. It was all flowery language and no plot, and yeah, it was edited nicely. It's more like a 1.5. I gave it 2 stars, rounded it up because I've read worse books, but other than that, I really don't care about this book. So those are all the books that I managed to read in May. This has been a very long video to record, so I need to go and edit this now. So I would love to know what you read in May and what you really enjoyed. Editing Becky here. So I forgot to mention in the video that my June wrap-up will be combined with my July wrap-up, because I'm about to get into SBFBO, so I don't read enough non-SBFBO stuff in a month to make it worth doing its own wrap-up. So I'll see you for my next wrap-up in July. So thanks for watching, and I shall see you all soon.